Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1159th New Social Environment. I'm Chloe, Director of Programs here at the Rail, and I have the privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Roe Ethridge and Andrew Woolbright. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Roe Ethridge takes equally from his work as a commercial photographer and artist. Blurring the lines that separate the two, Ethridge creates images that are simultaneously generic and intimate, often treading between humor and cynicism. Functioning in tandem, these motivations coalesce into an ongoing investigation into the mechanics of photographs and their ability to both retreat into the personal and expand to relay collective experiences. In 2022, Mack Books published American Polychronic, the most comprehensive catalog of Etheridge's work to date. Etheridge's work is held in the permanent collections of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, at the Tate Modern in London, and the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York, among many others. And our host today, artist, curator, and critic Andrew Woolbright, is based in Brooklyn and is an MFA graduate from RISD in painting. Woolbright is the founder and director of the gallery Below Grand, located on the Lower East Side in New York. In addition to curating, he's an editor-at-large for the Brooklyn Rail, which we're lucky to have Andrew as. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Andrew to get us started.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us all on this really rainy, sludgy day in New York. And Chloe and Magley, thank you so much for hosting this, and Andrew Krebs for making this so seamless and come together so easily. Ro, I'm so excited to get to talk to you today. I've loved your show. I've gotten to see it multiple times. It's really like the show. It's so timely and also a show that I keep sending students to and thinking about just like really showing how dynamic the medium of photography is, how much performance and the misalignment of performance plays a role within it, reality, narrative, meta-narrative. Like your show really gets at so many ideas of photography contained in one show. It never is simple. Like it's always like whatever you think the image is performing as, there's always, after looking at it long enough, there's something that kind of undoes itself. So I'm just really excited to get into that conversation with you, and thank you so much for joining us. And how you doing?
Good, man. Thank you. That's quite the setup.
I'm just,
I'm like,
I'm so
I'm like,
excited.
God, she really does all that? Oh wait, yeah, I guess I do that. Yeah. Damn.
Oh, I
Uh,
think it
no
does.
pressure. Yeah.
No
Uh,
pressure at all. But yeah, it's wonderful. And I mean, for me, I know how I interpreted the show and the work, and I think for me, your background really plays a huge role in that. So I'm wondering as we pull in or pull up images and begin to look at it, if we'd start from the very beginning and just talk about how you became interested in the image, like what was an image that arrested you or like really kind of made you say like this is something that I want to take myself and see if I can have some type of control over.
hmm. Um, yeah, I mean, like there's a lot of stuff that happened like through my childhood or early adolescence through my dad's interest in photography. So I sort of like around photo books and like Kodak anthologies. I remember seeing like the first time I have a memory of seeing Lee Friedlander and being like, what is this? Like it looks different.
Yeah.
uh, and then also like photo magazines, where it was like there would be like the ads in the front of photo magazines were often like for lighting equipment or whatever, but they would be pictures where you could see the lighting equipment and the sexy lady with the like, like long flowing, somewhat revealing gown, or, there was a lot, it was in the 70s, so there was a lot of photo technique stuff that like through the net, the shadow across a nude torso of a net, so that sort of 70s joy of photography thing was I was sort of soaking in that. Um, like some like it was like a part of suburban life in a way, but yeah, we'd spoken about this earlier, just that idea of like what's that earliest memory kind of experience with a photograph. And I think for me that is this picture that my dad made. That's a sort of, it's a typical picture of fireworks you've seen in like the long shutter drag, so it like has a lot of like light tracing kind of against the black night sky. And I don't really know I can't remember what the exact story is of like where it was shot, but somehow he worked for Southern Bell, either his department or Southern Bell or something had like a photo contest, and that picture got into the final round. And there was an exhibition at the Breakers Hotel, apparently.
Hmm.
And this picture got second place in this company-wide photography contest.
So cool.
And and I remember as a kid like hearing that story, and it's of course like completely mythic. And to be honest, I hadn't really thought about it until this morning when we were talking. And it's like I remember he got second place and he had the ribbon, and it was a really heavy, like very designed 70s kind, if you can imagine, it's like circular, and as I recall, it had these like wavy bits around the top, and it felt heavy. It was red and satin, and just like it was like, oh my gosh, like it was so significant in a way, that like is undeniable too. And I can almost imagine like seeing my kid look at something in that way, like the way a kid sees that stuff and their dad, and so I really hadn't thought about it until you asked me that and prompted me this morning. And it's like, holy shit, is that the actual beginning of this thing? Like it could be, but I do recall I've found over the years like boxes of like Kodachrome where my dad was testing the lens or the film or whatever. And so I'm like holding up, I'm like 4 years old. I don't remember holding up cards that say 5/6 out of 30th, 6/3 out of 30th, like, just going down, ding, 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 like, and just testing the film. And I don't recall, but so I guess I was like, I was in it, I was in the picture around photography in that way, in that sort of amateur 70s way from the start, so it seems likely that that had something to do with that. Let's put it that way.
That's so, I mean, that's so fascinating. Do you remember the image? Like, can you picture it in your head? Do you think, because the reason I ask you, think it's about the image itself or really kind of identifying with something that meant so much to your father or someone that you loved and then wanting to maybe like follow that kind of that path of something you loved, cared about this thing, and so you wanted to do it too? Or is it both?
I mean, it's not something that it doesn't really feel connected to my adolescent aesthetic
Hmm.
development or whatever when I started to consciously think about it. But I think it is there. I mean, it's like this image is a color photograph. It's generic. It's like you've seen it before, but it also like it works every time kind of thing. And
Yeah.
then the frame itself was like a sort of like grayish wide profile or face with a shallow profile, and it was like kind of like driftwood,
Mm.
a little driftwoody, which was probably like a common thing in Miami in the 70s, like
Yeah.
so it's like the entire thing, the frame, maybe it's even like I can see it against the wood paneling of our living room, it's like the whole fucking thing is like,
Oh, wow.
you know what I mean? Like it's like that is there, but then also it's like, yeah, must have something to do with the, winning an award or
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
undeniable. It's like, what? You're gonna win
Yeah.
an award for art, like for
Totally.
photography,
Also,
so,
I mean, it's so interesting too, because I mean, even the way you're describing it, like Barth, the way he described the pastoral was like a pastoral image is a simplistic subject that then reveals an excess of complexity, that like there's something that we think is simple and then it kind of unravels into this like, what is the landscape or what is that thing? And like it does maybe seem like, or it does to me anyways, that continued on as a type of theme of like starting with maybe what announces itself as a simple image, but then is really just deep complexity, like all there,
mhm,
like what is Rockaway, which we'll,
mhm.
may get to. But
Yeah.
but I mean, let's continue it from there because I found an interview of yours where you talked about how you specifically chose color photography because you thought black and white was kind of a cliche. You avoided 35 millimeter for that reason as well. You're drawn to large format. Like
Mhm.
it does seem to be this push-pull of like I don't know the language you want to use, like dialectic or like trying to avoid cliche and obstacles by doing the not uh conventional idea of things. Like,
And also
is that
dabbling
something you work?
cliche, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's yeah, I guess that is like there is some unconscious synthesis happening there in the dialectical type of argument of like, it's like hyper specialized and hyper generic, or and I think that like there's something about this. I've talked a lot about the fugue and the sort of musical aspects of sequencing images. To me, there's like I wouldn't call it like I have synesthesia, I hear the pictures or whatever, but it kind of makes a sound. And it's like,
Mhm.
or it feels like it makes a sound, or it vibrates like sound or something. But music and, two images next to each other, if you get the right ones together, it makes the sound. And then, it sort of extends out. And I noticed that when I was, I guess like, I tried to do it. It was at the end of Quark and the beginning of InDesign. So I was like, Quark was impossible, but I was right at the end of it. And then someone's like, you should try InDesign. So I started InDesign, and that was more intuitive. And it was something that I could like, almost like making a song, writing a song or something. It was like it could put these things together in a very quick, intuitive way and size them. And I think that was, that went along with this idea of this like the fugal or the musical part of this, how it relates to that. And I think in that juxtapositional way, there's that like you could find that dialectic thing in there. Um, but that was also something that I've been interested in for a while, but it's also it's one of those things like you try not to think about it too much because you don't want it to be like, oh, yes, I'm practicing a dialectical argument here or something like that. It's like it would be so boring if I was just trying to be intellectual about it. And so I don't feel that way. But I do think that I've said this before, like there's a sort of wild-minded person who is taking the pictures, who doesn't think much and moves fairly quickly, and can get frustrated. And, it's like that's me in the field or me in the studio. Um, and then there's the next personality, which is like the sort of, the editor person back in front of the computer. I shoot everything digital. And I found that immediacy is also super satisfying. Like I don't care. I don't want to wait. I don't wait to the film's processed. I couldn't imagine doing that, like waiting to pick up my film. Like that would drive me nuts. So like here's a great example. This was the picture that we're seeing now is a portrait of my daughter Lilu in on Martha's Vineyard in 2020. That was the summer of first summer of COVID, and she was 12. And she had asked me to take pictures because I think she wanted to have something that she could put on like social media. Like her friends were starting to do that. It was COVID, so it was more like this thing. And there was something, I've always thought about that photography as a sort of like service industry. There's a part of it, where you get, like the call, like, can you come take pictures of, our cat, like, and in this way, like to be prompted or asked by my daughter, there was this kind of, it's not a commercial job, it's not an assignment, but there is some aspect of that, like being invited to or asked to, that gave us some objectivity around it. Like, which if I had just been like, I just want to take your picture because you're 12, you're gonna be 13, it's COVID, it's so poignant, like that would have ruined it. So
Yeah.
the distance and objectivity that was like in our transaction there, I think allows for that thing to open up in a different way than if it was like, I'm like crying or like, it's like the tears come later, and there's a work to be done kind of now or something. If that makes sense.
That's so interesting. I mean, like the way you're describing that is like needing to be invited or it necessitating that collaboration for it to be something that you feel the need to take on. Like that kind of sounds like it's coming out of your interest in, Thomas Struth, Thomas Ruff, this idea of like the something that really makes your work so special, and makes, I think, all photographers, something I value in the photographers that I enjoy the work of, which is the acknowledgement that there is no such thing as like an authentic reel, that it's always manufactured, it's always set up, it's always pre-staged, and it is that collaborative process of two people trying to negotiate what is the reality that communicates something between them. I mean,
Mhm.
is that still kind of holding on to that conceptual background that you began with?
Oh, for sure. I think that there's no, I mean, that I would say like that's another sort of stage. If like the fireworks picture was the almost like, you know, mythological, Oedipal, like this is my this is my king dad or whatever who like got second place in a photography contest. And then, there's the books and the like, the sexy stuff in the magazines and the like serious stuff in the Kodak anthologies. And then when I was in art school in Atlanta, Thomas Roof came to the Goethe Institute and did a presentation. And I had art through my friend and mentor, Ron Jude. We're similar age, but I feel like he really was a mentor to me because he had so much knowledge about what was going on and like, really made it possible for me to, I don't know, to expose me to all of this stuff. And things that I was curious about, like I'd seen Thomas Roof in a magazine or, seeing these things in the library at Atlanta College of Art. And Ron Jude, who was teaching a couple classes at ACA at the time, really just like was like, all right, you need to come see, and like he had the library and everything. And I got to be, Roof came to the Goethe Institute and I got to be sort of pen pals with him for a little while. And he sent me a little catalog and I can't remember, it's in my storage space because of this recent move to Rockaway. I still have all my books are in storage, which is a bummer. But it was a little catalog and it was a mix of um, the typological series. So it was like a sequence that was mixed of like stars, newspapers, newspaper images, the portraits, the things I forget what it is when they blend the 3D images. So it was like a mix of like four different sets of his work from a show and a Kunsthal somewhere in Europe. And I think that became, without knowing it, really like that became a sort of like a touchstone, a Madeline, a thing that was like I didn't realize how important that was until later. And I was like, oh my God, is it that little book that fucking like broke everything? It was like, you don't have to do a project. And even though Thomas Roof is doing everything based on project, the fact that it could mix together, that art didn't have to be thesis based and like you could do this, and mix it together. And when it mixed, it was better than the single thing, better than the example, a bunch of examples for me. Shoot, I just went off on a tangent. Did I?
No,
Okay.
no,
So what the
it's like,
beginning of that was.
oh, that's great. I mean, it also reminds me of there's that kind of book on images and of Burroughs and Geisen where they talk about the third mind, that like when a text is next to a photograph, it creates like the third mind, something that's neither either or, but it creates like a third type of new
Mhm.
space of context. And that's like the whole game of it, whether you call that a liminal space or you call that a dialectic or whatever that is,
Yeah,
it's like the holding that.
yeah. I mean, it seems like that is um basically a fundamental way that like aesthetics and knowledge and things that move forward, like it just made it seems that it must synthesize for it to progress forward so that the synthesized thing can then become the thesis or like the one thing next to another makes the third thing and then the third thing becomes one thing with another thing. That's how it makes sense to me. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
oversimplifying something, but it is like it's where the magic happens for me.
Do you still find yourself avoiding the project? Like do you still like it with this show? Like that's a careful balancing act.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a little. it feels like I'm less there's less at stake in that right now. For me at the time, it was like a way to I felt like I had to distinguish myself from something, but not so much from other people, but from the way I had been working, which not a lot of people knew or cared. But for me, it was an important shift to like leave that sort of like more project-based or thesis-based stuff um, behind and go, and like just be responding to things more immediate, which of course led to like a sort of prolific like, expansion of my archive because I was shooting so much commercially. And so then I would wind up back, be in the present, but also like in the archive, digging around like, oh, where's that one, from that editorial that was so fucked up? Or I took that picture that they didn't use in the magazine, and that's the one that would fit right here, would make this song sound great, And so it was like having my own stock agency, you know, like where I could
Yeah.
pull imagery and fold it in. And sometimes it would, sometimes it would work, and sometimes there would be like essentially like a project worth of images behind that one image. Like, it's like the still lifes of jewelry that were that. Actually, there's like 20 different pictures behind that one, that are of this different jewelry or whatever. And so in some ways it's like it's infuriating because it feels so infinite. I know it's not, but it feels like I'll never get to show you guys a bunch of these good ones. You know?
Yeah.
Um, and so that in a way it is a project, and it's a futile project to not work on a project or something. I don't know. It's that thing. It's like if you're saying it's not a project, then it's a project, right? The project is no project. Like, so,
Yeah. Well,
uh,
I love that concept of like editing serving kind of like a metaphysical role. Like a good friend of mine, Molly Zuckerman Hartung, she told me once that when she's invited to give a talk to a school or something or a lecture, she'll put like 500 slides in the PowerPoint. And it's like, it'll freak the person out that gets the file because they're like, whoa. And she's like, I only get to 30 of them, but I just like the idea that there's like a weight of everything I could have gotten to. And like that weight is
it's
important for me. Yeah. And like, I think I'd imagine that's a little creative in the same way of like, I know all these stacks of images that can go out in any direction, but I
hmm
chose this one.
hmm
Um, yeah. And also, I mean, just going back to it because it's like this so wonderful, but we're steaming through things. Like, I feel like that's such an important break from you looking at, Struth and Ruff but then, like Ruff is like editing other people's images. It's such a postmodern practice. And
hmm
you, as you just said, you are the stock photographer. You're using yourself as a stock photographer. That's so much more difficult to like to complicate that relationship of the editor and you're the person that took the editorial image. Like that
hmm
feels like a really important step in that type of idea of photography. How do
Yeah, I
you, I
think
guess I didn't finish with a question. How do you navigate that of being potentially ironic or editorial to yourself, but in a way that you're starting with yourself as an idea of a stock photographer in some cases?
I guess so. Yeah, I mean, I think that without knowing that it like it just for some reason reminds me of like the um I felt like perhaps it's a dialectic or sort of like juxtapositional thing of like Warhol and Friedlander, and this like there's a little bit of a like ordinary persona thing that they both do in very different ways, but both very prolific and kind of like nothing to say.
Mhm.
That makes sense. Like there's like a sort of like blank, like the work is, like Friedlander would be like, the work is the work, or I talk about it, but it wouldn't be like he wouldn't be quoting Barthes or like, saying like
Yeah.
it's it's just what I do. And in a way, like, and then Warhol, of course, is like, like what? Yeah, I guess, I don't know. Like and
Yeah.
and so there's this persona thing that is both real and also like put on. And I guess when you're in doing like this sort of um, lens-based modern apparatus, and you're putting yourself in front of it, or you're photographing yourself reflected in the, facades of the world, like you're participating in it um, through a persona, through this like the artifice that we were talking about earlier. And so I guess it was like accepting that as the, you know, like I am artifice and I am also authentic. And so whatever that third thing is what, it's like the two things, against each other. And it is, as you were talking, I was imagining, like, how do you navigate that? And I imagined myself like having to squeeze through something. Like I could almost like imagine my body turning sideways and like squeezing through something. And
Yeah.
so I don't know what that means, but it's like, it's tricky, I guess is what the answer that like, it's like, it's not always my favorite thing, but it is like there's a kind of nausea that's pleasant. It's like a kind of feeling of like ooh, I don't know if you get that when you're working on something and you get to that point where you're like, ooh, that's nasty, like and it kind of makes you feel sick. And that must mean it's good.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's like really relatable. And I mean, I think that I mean, I wrote in my notes when I saw the show a second time, just like tightrope walker, that everything is that fragile, tenuous space of, you know, and there's so much writing about it. There's, Umberto Eco talking about Las Vegas and hyperreality. There's Barth, there's almost anyone that's dealt with images, David Levi Strauss, of course. But it's like when you layer the ordinary so many times on itself, it starts to collapse like a Jenga tower or something, then it's like too ordinary that you're like, what is happening here? And like if it's too much, then it becomes like narrative or magical or surreal. And I feel like your work sometimes goes into that territory, but oftentimes doesn't take that far of a step. And obviously there's so many trap traps and pitfalls to keeping things totally in the realm of the ordinary where it doesn't do that flicker of transcendence. It's like really incredible the images that you do choose to display and then kind of cultivate through editing. Tight fits, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
That
yeah. And I mean, I
yeah.
hope that I would hope that there is something, I guess it's like it's definitely not for me to look at alone. It's always with an audience in mind. And I think in some ways it's like that's an interesting question that I haven't really thought about, but it's like I don't like when I'm doing stuff like, for example, this picture here, this is others, like this is at the counter and the boardwalk here in Rockaway where I'm talking to you from where I live. Shorefront Parkway is like right there. Um, and so, on the boardwalk, there's a concession stand, and in the summer um, and early fall, this coffee shop, Others, is open, and it's a takeoff from Brothers. There's a bro anyway, it's complicated, but this is the counter where you pay and pick up your coffee. And I had been staring at it for 2 years, 2 summers, just like looking at it and like, oh yeah, I love that picture of Kate Bush. And I actually don't remember if it was like, I think it was just like this summer, but it was the last day that the place was open in October, November, whatever. I think it was October. Um, and I was like, holy shit, I need to take a picture of this. And I was like, hey, Dave, is it okay if I come back, and like when y'all are closed and I can put a backdrop up over this? And they were like, yeah, of course. And so kind. And like we all know each other out here, which is nice. And yeah, so that was, why am I telling you this? I guess it's because like this is a case where this was not made for a magazine, right? So, and this one was, I think, the last picture that I made for the show. So it was as if we'd come through this whole process and then I was like, I need this picture in the show. Like once I knew what the whole musical soundtrack was, I was like, I need this one in the show. And it turned out to be like a crucial image for the show. And why am I telling you that? Because there's these intentions that are not, they're oblique, or they're, concealed. The image naturally makes them invisible, but you kind of hear them or feel them and sense these things. But it's like in like one case, like the portrait of next to this one with Arena Shake, like that one was made for the Travel Almanac. And so it was like, I don't know what's going to happen with this. I've shot her before. She's incredible. She's awesome. But I had no, I was just trying to get a cover for Travel
Yeah.
Almanac that they would like, and it was like, this is center square. This really hits the bullseye with the captain's hat. And I've used that
Yeah.
captain's hat, I don't know, half a dozen times in different artworks, including on myself. And and so it was like, that's where my intention was here. And then later it come back and be like, I need this in the show, you know?
Yeah, I mean, this image is just stunning. I mean, and like I think going back to it of like seeing a show that has so many ideas of photography kind of contained within it, but a similar touch or a
Mhm.
similar thing, like, you know, it really does that thing of like she's like looking through the camera, looking through the photographer. Like it's like you're capturing someone who's like it seems like in a moment of like blurring out everything except for the idea of becoming an image, like the eyes are staring, but they don't seem to be seeing. Like they're
Mhm.
seeing through, they're blurring or something. It's like
Yeah.
it's so uncanny. And then like it's so sensuous, like the texture in the top of the hat that's really in detail, and then how it loses focus. And it really is the longer you look at it, the more it unravels
Well, that's
and then
awesome, man.
comes
Yeah,
back together again.
it was a tough one to crop, actually. But yeah, I feel like it has something like it has a voice that I've used before, so it's sort of like but that's the thing, is that like I can't make that voice with my own mouth. The person has to do it. Like she has to do it. And like it
Yeah,
reminds me a little bit, now that I'm looking at it on the screen here, of the portrait of Nancy with the Polaroid camera. And there's like, it's like a subtly, it's not in the show, but it's an older picture. And there is, I think there's that thing where it's like um it's a type of like modeling thing where you sort of like you're looking at the air in between the lens
yeah,
and your
yeah,
face. You're not really looking at the lens, or you're looking at the air through the lens, through the back of the photographer's head, and all the way over there, like somehow you can
yeah,
like you throw your gaze.
yeah,
And and yeah, I think there's something, maybe that's more what it's like, it's kind of like, or whatever it does, it sort of holds the viewer in a way. Like I generally prefer the notion of the absorptive image, where you get to like look at the person without them looking back at you. But in a case like this, it almost becomes like that thing where they're letting you look, even though they're confronting you, like, or it feels like they're looking at you, like you get to look
yeah,
around. You have to keep coming back and checking, because they're like, they are looking at you.
yeah.
Looking
Looking
through.
but maybe not seeing,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
like uncrowding their vision so that they
Right. Like
can just
just
be.
past you. I used to do that with the model portraits in the 99 2000 time. I would have the model look at the lens on the edge. So you would just be looking at the edge of the lens, and somehow it created a sort of vibration where it was like, are they looking at me? Or are they looking just off?
Yeah,
And actually that's a good segue to this image, which um Andrew Russeth talked about in the Times thing, and how Anna sort of, it feels like she's looking at you, and then you get up on it and she's actually looking past you. So it's this kind of like, oh, it's not me. It's like some other dude over here.
Well, man, there's so many places to take this that I hope we get to all of the places to take it. But I mean, David Lynch has come up before and should as a
Mhm.
parallel. And I don't know if you've seen that. There's a really great documentary Criterion had for a minute that was David Lynch and the Wizard of Oz. That apparently David Lynch, when he was asked one time, "Do you ever think about the Wizard of Oz?" and he said, "Every single day." And people interviewing David Lynch, seeing that every film he's ever made is trying to react to or understand The Wizard of Oz better. But there's this beautiful moment where John Waters is talking about David. And he's like, David, I was always kept out of the white picket fence. And I just wanted to like destroy it or like burn it down. He's like, but
Yeah.
David, the more he was kept out, he wanted to get on the other side of it and he wanted to be a part of it. And
Yeah.
there's that conflicted desire relationship.
Mhm.
Not to keep playing kitchen sink psychologist, but like an image like this that's so much about like you kind of desire almost like an interior or like a home decor magazine title cover thing, or an
Mhm.
editorializing. Is this something you desire or you're suspicious of, or do you find that out in the editing room on the other side of it?
Like with regard to this
Too
particular
much.
image?
Yeah, this image.
Well, it's an interesting thing, it's Anna and we didn't know each other, but we knew each other's work. And so,
Yeah,
but she is also, as a whatever, like 20, 20, 30, she's a young person, has so much image savvy, like it's like the difference. We all talk about the growing up with the internet, but like there's a camera. Where's my thing? Are you seeing this? There's a camera on this thing, like this is a phone,
yeah,
but also the camera, like they just grew up in pictures, like in a very different, so I think that there's something um that like there's a ready-made quality to that. And she also, in some ways she jumped into her persona, you know.
yeah,
We're doing these pictures, we did a story for GQ. And so, it's that, you know, there's something collaborative about that like um probably could happen with anybody, who's like grown up with a can't, they understand, what's happening.
yeah.
And not don't have to be too serious about it or something. I don't know. But what was the
Yeah.
question? Do I think
Well, I
about
guess like
desire?
for you as a photographer, like I wonder if that plays a role of like your desire for the ordinary or your rejection of it, or do you think in those terms of, you know, dropping out of something or not participating or wanting the kind of normalcy of some of these images? Like it feels like there's this balance of like, is this a drive back towards the white picket fence and the
I
kind of
see.
suburban life?
All right, that's the kitchen sink psychology. Okay, so yes, I think that like it is both like evidence of my trauma or torture
Mhm.
in suburban America. Um, I was telling my kid today, we were talking about something and I was recalling like, I remember like I really wanted a cast on my arm bad because I wanted everyone to sign it, you know? And like I never broke my arm until later in high school when they didn't have the plaster cast anymore. Um, and I don't know why I'm saying that. Anyway, we were talking about suburbs, I guess, but the I think that there is this kind of almost like there's like a yeah, there's a sort of it's not a nostalgia for something that I knew, or it's more like if it's from something that I knew, it's like both the like fascination and terror of growing up suburban South Christian, like, the sort of like repressive elements, the hypocrisy of church people, like um the boredom, like, and then, I think about also the boredom that's so incredible that my kids don't get to have, like riding my bike back in the nature center, like totally scared that a hippie kid was going to be high on PCP and like hold me down and make me smoke PCP. It's like after school special fantasy, it's like, so
Yeah.
like all of that stuff is like, I lived in a sort of like comical version of a David Lynch movie. Do you know what I mean? It's like a sort of,
Yeah.
it was fun and funny. There was no ears severed on the ground. It wasn't like as dramatic. There was no naked Isabella Rossellini in my front yard, but some shit went down, no doubt.
Yeah.
Things happened. People had to go to the hospital. People burned themselves or cut their, themselves or got grounded because they were fooling around at the baseball park. And, just the things happened, but they're still like pretty, like why
Yeah.
am I telling you this,
Well, I
doctor?
mean, I think that's another like a really interesting thing, which is, like I don't know if anyone's spoken about it. I'm sure they have because it's exhaustive writing about it. But like David Lynch, uh, it's so much about the function of the picturesque in so many
Mhm.
ways. Like between the sublime and beauty is the picturesque that is that ear on the ground, is like the thing
Mhm.
that like ups the ordinary in a way that's maybe terrifying or beautiful, but it's going from boredom to that. I do think that like agreeing with you, it's you know it's upsetting that maybe that's more difficult to have because like the low vibration of everyday life is shorter. Everything is so immediate and tactile, and you miss those moments of like, oh my God, the hospital thing, or like or I remember when three friends in high school pranked another friend by giving him oh, what's that? Not Epicac. It's the thing that makes you like shit uncontrollably.
Yeah.
And the kid had to go to the hospital, and it was a prank that just went horribly wrong. And like the whole school was like, anyways, but that was like a maybe that's a type of picturesque of the ordinary. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
the thing. It's an interesting thing. And I do think that obviously with regard to Lynch in particular, it was um there's no way around it. Like Blue Velvet was like a religious thing, and I think the only other film that I felt like that about before seeing Blue Velvet was Valley Girl,
Mhm. Interesting. Yeah.
which was like it was religious in the way that we would watch it every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Um,
The
and
performances.
and then when I was in art school, the photography, I went to Florida State University for a couple years, and there was there's George Blakely and Adam Strauss and this guy Charles Badland that it was a kind of an amazing photography department and led by George Blakely, who was a really smart guy. So I got exposed to a lot of like conceptual notions of photography there. And I think it was a great thing for me to sort of like get off the, get off this idea of like, so then there's Cartier-Bresson and then there's Robert Frank. And then, it's like this kind of like thing is like, oh, fuck that. Like this is so much more interesting. This is more contemporary, and like, it felt like I could like uh do things like it's like seeing Robert Cumming, and like uh uh oh, what's his name? Dwayne thank you his name.
Michael.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And these sequential things and Baldessari
Yeah.
and Warhol and like folding, all of a sudden things are starting to fold in. And then I can't remember what year did Twin Peaks come out. It was like, and at that point I was at art school and it was like I felt a little like oh man, there's a burden in the South to be like a sort of drippy Gothic black and white photographer. And like if I want to have a career in this town, I'm gonna have to be some form of Gothic bullshit. And I couldn't do it. I just didn't want to do it. And I was like, that is not my story. My story is like, suburban Methodist church, Sunday school teacher, like a lot of repression, but also a lot of like, you know, smaller moments or whatever you want to call it. And so I think that Twin Peaks, like that happened at the time that I was like getting into video, and I wrote about it for Aperture. They asked, and like I can remember the video class that I was in was the day after the airing of Twin Peaks. The Twin Peaks would air the night before, so our teacher Scott Vogel would tape it and bring it in, and then we would sort of like deconstruct or just try to figure out what the fuck just happened, and it was like it was prime time. It was on
Yeah.
TV. It was on ABC. I mean, it was like unbelievable that this thing was happening in that way. It felt like, I guess it felt a little bit like not anything's possible, but there was something um just shocking about that, that it was like that it this like kind of secret was out, or something. I don't know exactly how to say it,
Yeah.
but um so I'd say like
Yeah, I
Blue
mean,
Twin Peaks like really did, form something for me, and a lot of people, I'm sure. So,
well, I think the other thing kind of continuing on with that is like this idea of like conclusion versus context, maybe that you share also with like that Lynchian idea of an image, which is like so much has come out in the last few weeks with Lynch's passing, but like Lars von Trier was interviewed, or I saw a von Trier interview, and he's like, Lynch is brilliant because he came up with a way to never have closure. Like someone
mhm,
climbs up a ladder in episode one and they never climb back down, and you get used to that inability to conclude. Like you
mhm,
start to kind of realize it's always going to be suspense. There's that idea kind of behind your work in some ways that
mhm,
there isn't easy conclusion, but then context is so important,
mhm,
like the images you do choose. Like I think about the tulip image that we've come across a few times. If that image is floating outside on its own, I'd really have questions about it, like wondering what, like I'd feel something very romantic from it, but I'd be like, is
uh-huh,
this a romantic photographer? Like is
uh-huh,
this like a type of sincere ordinary? But it really is the whole show together that makes it feel like
mhm.
yeah, like closer to Twin Peaks or Blue Velvet, where you're like
Yeah.
it's both super romantic and over hyper romantic, but also hyper suspicious in another image.
No, I see what you're saying. And I think that brings up something interesting that it didn't really occur to me until recently, or not recent, but it seemed that like, okay, so contemporary art in that 90s, early 90s time frame, the installation was predominant, or like it was like a photography and installation, right? And so like suddenly like the thing that was in the space, like, you know I think that there's the putting things next to each other, but also like putting things far away from each other, or across the room from each other, like, and like Christopher Williams, like, sort of like as the sort of Jedi master of these things,
Mhm.
and like not still not really, in a way, like I still don't know what Christopher Williams is like, how could you, he's so fucking smart, but at the same time, it's like that feels like it has that kind of suspense to it, and it feels like the irresolution is also very musical, like it is like it doesn't
Yeah.
need to, you could like, finish with that high note, and it's part of the art. It's not a lack of, it is a gesture that is the thing, and so you have to travel with it, and that's the thing, it's not convenient as a thought thing, as a
Yeah.
sort of earworm, or thought worm, or whatever. Like it's not convenient for you. It sticks with you and asks you to keep doing it. It's like I was saying before with audience, like I'm still always thinking without thinking, or aware of somehow that this is not to just be seen by me. It's not, I'm not trying to make my best image. I'm making it in the context of an audience. And so
Yeah.
sometimes it's in the context of the audience, like for a magazine, and it's like, oh, it's Fantastic Man. And who is this guy? Who is reading Fantastic Man? And it's like, then, so I'm thinking about that. But what's interesting is when it gets taken out of Fantastic Man and put, like, what happens if you put that on the wall? Well, then that's a different thing. It activates the stuff around it in a different way. and it's no longer just the proper noun fantastic man, you know, like it's like something
Yeah.
that plus something else. But oh man, I'm just as I'm speaking, I'm like, have I had too much coffee today? I just finished cold brew. I'm wondering, am
Well,
I?
well, I guess I mean, like, I think it's all really appropriate for the show and the ideas of the show, and want to, I mean, like, I appreciate that you bring up music because we really didn't unpack the fugue too much, but I think about, before I knew you or before I knew your work, seeing the Andrew WK image, and
Mhm.
like something that I was like kind of like trying to go back and remember was at a time where you saw the image and it had such a vital role in understanding the musician, like pre-YouTube, like
Right.
pre now every musician can get out in front and say, this is who I am. Now you understand the music by my context. But like that image of the bloody nose is like you listen to the song and you're like, this is more complex than a, pop party song or a type of this is like really visceral,
Right.
and like I think I mean I'd imagine you never lose that type of authorship or that sense of authorship that like you're providing in like the way an image accompanies a sound or before someone can really have an interview and get to someone like me in Southern Illinois, it's the
Hmm.
image that completes the music.
Right. Hmm. It's the image that what's the music?
It's the image that kind of like resolves the music or
Mm.
contextualizes or completes in so many ways.
Hmm. I mean that particular image is so like there's a kind of sometimes the artist or in this case the photographer, you're like really like conduit, like you're just sort of like, you know, I had some ideas and he had some ideas and like something magic happened that was like you couldn't, if either one of us had like tried too hard, it would have messed it up. And it is that third thing, like the text and image that you were mentioning earlier, and it was for nothing. It wasn't for the album. And I don't think he had written uh what is it? I Get Wet yet, or no, it was before with the Party Hard, like I don't think it had been written yet. So it was like or maybe he was just starting, but we had met at Windows on the World during some kind of event where early Fisher Spooner performance and Andrew just played keyboard and
Hmm.
sang. And so there was no band, it was just him like in a keyboard, pounding a keyboard, and asked me if I would take a picture for him. And so like
Yeah.
that's how it started. And yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking about that the other day. Like Antoine Sargent wrote a piece in the American Polychronic book about when he was a kid in Chicago and like was like confronted with that image in the Tower Records or
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's
like,
so cool to have been like, the person behind that image. You know what I mean? Like it's like
yeah.
that's kind of the dream, you know what I mean?
Well, and also, I mean, like that's incredible too. Just thinking that like the image really does play a process and maybe the agency or the artist allowing themselves to be something they're not quite yet. Like they're the keyboard singer, and then like the bloody nose image allows them to take on the persona that you're, starting to be found out through posing and it's incredible to think. I mean, it's obviously true that sometimes getting your picture taken is like the first attempt at who we end up becoming or like the idea of ourselves that we want to step into.
Hmm.
I, we have not talked because there's so much to get to. We have not talked at all about Rockaway, which
Oh yeah.
I'd really like to, I'd really like to
It's
get
so
to.
funny. Yeah, it's true. We haven't.
Uh, Rockaway has been a subject for a long time. Your first book came out in 2007. Um, like, do you feel like you've come to know Rockaway better through the more images that you've taken? Is it always been easy to try to depict? For me, Rockaway is about as far away as you can get from like the Eiffel Tower or the Empire State Building as you can. Of like,
Mhm.
there's a singular idea of what a space is through like an architecture or like through a an aesthetic viewpoint or something. Like Rockaway is so endlessly polyphonic, maybe, that it's like hard to know what Rockaway is no matter how many times you visit it. But I'm
Yeah,
wondering if you feel like you're getting clearer or farther away.
I think it's clearer. I mean, it is a little bit like the edge of civilization, literally. I mean, the ocean, that's it. It's wild. It's like a desert or, outer space. I mean, um, there's no, I don't know what's underneath that. Like, sometimes green, sometimes brown water. But I can see that there's now whales going by and dolphins, whereas 20 years ago there was not. Um, and I think it has changed a lot for me after moving out here. It was scary to move out too because as a I had to give up my studio to do so. And that was the reason why I moved out. I was just like spending too much money on a studio and a three-bedroom apartment for me and my kids. So I already owned this place and with a friend, and so it was like a fiscal um, necessity at that point, and it was like turned out to be such a blessing, such a I'm just so fucking grateful that I'm here. And like, like the funny thing is like getting off the hamster wheel a little bit of like I have a professional identity, I have a studio, I shoot here, I do, like I have, all this stuff. Like I think it forced me to sort of let go of some things that probably were not helping me. Um, oh, we went off the slideshow.
I
Is
get,
that
yeah.
right? Oh, anyway.
Okay.
So yeah, the we can go off the slideshow. I just suddenly saw
No, no.
myself and Andrew talking, and I forgot that I was on camera actually. I hope I didn't pick my nose or
Yeah.
anything. So anyways, there's just something about sunshine and exercise that like is literally is good for you. And I've been surfing a lot and all that stuff, but also like being out here every day, it changed some of the overwhelming, I still find it overstimulating, especially in the summertime. And I think I mentioned this to you the other day when we were talking, like it's like Walt Whitman would his mind would be blown if he could see what Rockaway looks like on a summer Sunday in August. I mean, it's like literally every single corner of the world is represented on that beach. Um, and of course, like everyone's like taking selfies or like they're in a group like with the sunset behind, and it's like it's kind of brutal. The municipal vibes are not it doesn't feel like a romantic beach. It's a municipal. It is the Ramones Rockaway Beach, and it is like New York, and it's like it is Queens. You know what I mean? It's not even Brooklyn. Like it's like hardcore. And like I don't know if you could hear them today, but the flight path is here, and sometimes it's like just booming. Like sound of jet engines. But today not too bad. But it's an overstimulating place, and there's a lot, as a photographer, there is a photo project every single place you set your eyes, like whether it's the architecture or the people or the weather or the ocean or just about anything out here feels like it's like it could be potentially a photo project or, direction to go. So I felt like I was like, I don't know what to do. Like in 2007, the thing I didn't take a lot of pictures out here for the book called Rockaway, New York. But I thought of it more as a sort of a metaphor. It's like as a place where an analogy, like a place where, the driftwood floats in from the ocean and the crap comes out from the land, and it all gets mixed up there. But it was also, at that time it was when we were all coming to terms with like the fact that like eventually if the oceans do continue to rise, none of this will be above water. And so it was there was a New York Times thing I can remember from like 2006 or something, and it showed a map of like everything just gone, like in over time. And I think that Rockaway, New York book felt a little bit like it was like this is the it's almost like a like what you would find in a time capsule after the, ocean, takes this all away. You know what I mean? It's like a sort of random array of
And
images that were kept for some reason, And now I think I feel very different about that, although there is something similar to the allowance of bringing disparate imagery in and not telling the story of Rockaway, but using it as a sort of like as a as a fictive place, as a place to write my screenplay or whatever, to tell the story through these fragmented bits and pieces, where it's like each picture does not have to tell a story. They come together and conspire towards a story or something like that.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's such a beautiful way to think about it. And maybe that's where so much of the attempting the sincere, but it comes through as artificial, is in that that realization that there is no future, or that there's a brick wall at the end of the train tracks where eventually this will be underwater. It's like
Mm.
how do you capture or practice presence when you know that there's a limit to when this can be possible, you know?
Mhm.
I have one more question quickly before I hand it off to everyone, just because I'm interested. You can tell, you can keep this mysterious and not answer, but something I really value about your practice is there are times where some of the images are functioning as a job in the editorial, and the editing process is really where you get to engage subjectivity. And then there are sometimes where they're incredibly contrived and you're trying to recreate a scene that's personal to you. You're really staging, you're really like trying to create something. And I'm wondering if I like that every show I've seen of yours, there's a balance of both. There's the image of your daughter, which is maybe the most or least contrived you can be,
Mm.
versus something that you're like, really, I'm trying to stage this thing. Was there an image that took you maybe more work to stage, or that you really had to get precisely right from an idea and starting from that place rather than working with a collaborative process?
Yeah, let me think about this. I mean, they all, for the most part, like I get, and that this may be part of the like why I'm happy to be 55 years old and have done this for a long fucking time. Always took the long route, could never do it the right way without fucking it up. So I have learned all the ways to not do it also. So maybe I've gotten better at like containing that uh whatever that is, the like, it's like, I can let it go. I can let go of this. If it's not working, I can let it go. I don't want to work it and, I don't want to overdo it and ruin the picture kind of thing, right? It's like, um, I mean, we used to, it sort of became a joke because I used to say it like at every crit. But it's like the Jasper Johns rule, you take the thing, you do something to it, you do another thing to it, then you leave it alone, And if it doesn't work, you got to keep doing shit to it. And it's like really, it is the best advice. Just fucking leave it, you know? Don't keep doing it and driving yourself nuts, Like, so I would say that in the show as it is, it's probably the hand holding the hose thing. Like that's a very technical picture. It requires like a strobe that like captures the motion. And then it was shot in front of a Fuji inflatable Fuji raft, like that green color comes from a 80s Fuji, maybe 90s, maybe 2000, I don't know. I got it on eBay, but it was like an inflatable Fuji raft that was deflated and used as a background. But it was so, it's like that plasticky rubber stuff. So it's like folded, it had been folded. So like the creases never come out. And I was like, it just looks like shit, like the color's right, but the creases are too much. And so I just took the clone stamp or whatever Photoshop tool and just mushed everything. And then it kind of turned into that like Oliphant painted background look to it. So in
Yeah.
that case, that probably was the most, weirdly, that picture of the hose is the most technical and overworked one. You know what I mean? Because I had to get the spray right, and it's my hand, and my assistant's shooting it, and it's like, there's not, it's like less control feeling. And then, okay, so once we got that right, then I had to get, painted over, and then I had to like to make that print, I had to take the smaller file and like overlay it onto a larger file. It was there was a lot of work went into that
Yeah.
seemingly simple picture, whereas some of the other ones, you know, were fairly straightforward. You know, like the glowing orb pictures from those. That's from just around the corner here in my neighbor's yard, and you know, it was like a thing that I had walked past them a million times, never noticed, or I noticed and I was like, oh, cool, those are cute. And then, you know, it hit me. It's like, this is important. Set up the camera and like waited for the color to change. And it was that thing, like, I guess you could call it my version of a decisive moment. You know, it was like, we don't need to think about this. We are doing this and it's done. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Those are the ones that are full Wizard of Oz to me. They're really fantastic. And yeah, I'm glad we got to talk about the water hose image because it is avoids the kind of cliche image of a stop motion thing. I just love the imperfection of the water dripping out and spraying and like kind of the awkward point in the stream that it catches, and then
Yeah.
knowing how much texture. It's like it makes me think of Bill and Flusser talking about he describes magic as the magic is always correlated to the ordinary. It's the anti-ordinary. And it's like
Mhm.
that clone stamping is like how you take the ordinary thing and make it, I guess, a form of magic,
Mhm.
which I appreciate.
You might
Well,
appreciate.
I
I wanted to tell you, Blake Rain told me, he said that, oh, it's a brush. He said that like that hose
oh
turned into a brush because of the
yeah,
bristles, you
of
know?
course, right. Yeah, that's the length of it. Yeah. Well, this could go on forever. I have many more questions we didn't get to. I love getting to talk to you, Ro. Everyone here, I hope you get a chance to see the show and really have the time that's appropriate to spend with each image and watch as they come into focus and out of focus as to their meaning. But thank you so much, Ro, and I want to give everyone a chance to ask you some questions too. And it's been wonderful getting to know more about the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Rowan Andrew. This has been such a pleasure to listen to. And yeah, I have several questions queued up from the audience.
Okay.
The first question is from Guillaume. Guillaume, are you online? Do you want to unmute still to ask your question? If you turn your camera on, I will unmute you. Um, if not, I'll go ahead and ask on your behalf. The questions are, there are several really good ones. Let's see. I just wrote a question. I wanted to ask for images like the photograph of the grapes on the tablecloth. Do you use a similar methodology or dialogue with your subject as you would use with a portrait of a person? That's one of the first questions that they asked. Oh, there's Guillaume. Here, I'll give them the chance to unmute.
Hello. Hi, Ro. We haven't met before, but this has been a delightful conversation. And thank
Awesome.
you,
Thank you.
Thomas. Thank you, Andrew, as well. And this wonderful, it's a wonderful way to see your work as well in person. I actually feel like we're all there in the exhibition and you're showing us around right now.
I know that's pretty cool. Yeah. Awesome.
And thank you for starting to ask my question. I think there were a couple of thoughts I was thinking about, but that was a really interesting thing I was thinking about because the moment you started talking about this very specific image of your daughter Lilu, which seems very personal, but that at the same time very dignified. You know, the way you talked about it, you not wanting to just be like this first year of COVID, you know, and I was thinking it suddenly clicked in my mind when I saw the image of the grapes that it had the same level of sensitivity.
Mhm.
But I was thinking like, oh, one of the recurring themes that you spoke about is also the spontaneity of your work and not really wanting to force the moment necessarily. So I was just thinking how that translates, I guess.
Yeah, I mean it's in a weird way. I mean, I love that you bring those two together because there is something like in the light that while it's a totally different scenario, like the Rockaway or the grapes are shot at the farmers market in Rockaway. It's called the Warehouse Market, and it's my friend Pam, and I don't know if you've seen that picture of the hand holding the apple of mine. It was like on the
Mm.
cover of Aperture. That was an apple from her place. Like, you know, the stuff that she gets is so photogenic sometimes that it's just like I can't take it, you know, I just have to like make a picture of this, you know, fruit or vegetable or whatever it is because it's so photogenic. And this a day last summer, she had those, I guess they're like Concord grapes. They're super round. They're just perfectly round, and it's just like optically, we were talking, I was like, sorry, can I set up something here for the grapes? And so it was a very different situation between the grapes and the portrait of Lulu, but there is a sort of like, I suppose there is a sort of permission and generic quality. They have overlaps in that way, but also like the way the light was on Martha's Vineyard that day had this sort of like, has this overcast, often has this overcast. And then where the grapes were, it was a sunny day, but she had like these like white tarps, which was creating that kind of like backlit overcast light on the grapes. And I'm kind of a sucker also for the checkerboard pattern, whether it's black and white, right? I like the plaid and check, and it's like, so yeah, and so oddly enough, that was made with this camera right here, the
Wow.
one. So I probably, if it hadn't turned out so good, I probably would have gone back and like shot it with my Canon, but I've made a lot of pictures with the iPhone over the years, and I did take the grapes. I bought the grapes and brought them home and tried to make other pictures of them, but that was the one that was the magic one. And yeah, I mean, it's I'm not sure if I'm answering your question now. I've like talked myself into another place probably, but you want to ask something else?
Yeah, well, it sounds like there is an exchange, like the way you were describing the engagement about the grapes with your friend Pam. So it does sound like there's that continued level of care, I guess.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think that a rude way of saying is like complicity, everyone participating. It's like kind of collaborative. It's also like there's something kind of, the artist takes probably more than they give.
mm,
So it's not all sweet and nice, there's something that's like, you sort of have to take advantage of these opportunities, but then, the hope is that like this is something that I can share, what I'm saying? It's like
yeah,
like, um, but you have to do that, right? Like you have to apprehend that thing to some degree. And you know, for me, when I saw them there on that table, it was like, this is a must do. So
mm, thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Guillaume, for that question. And I'm going to ask a couple more, Ro.
Mhm.
Um, we've got a question from Greg Allen. Greg is wondering, well, you kind of already answered this, but is wondering if you approach self-portraits as you do other portraits.
Mm. I've been talking about this a little bit because someone was giving me shit about I'm making a wheat paste poster campaign
Mhm.
for the show. And I did not put the self-portrait that you guys used, the orange with the green hat, orange background with the green hat thing that you guys used for your announcement. I'm making a 48 by 60 poster of that along with some others that will be wheat paste. And if you want to see it, it'll be up. Like Andrew's got some construction going on the Broadway entrance. So if you happen to be in town Saturday and probably most of next week, it'll be up. But it's a little hard to tell because like people cover stuff or rip it down, and like this happens all the time. But anyway, that picture is going to be the poster. And somebody was like giving me a hard time. Oh, you're going to put your self-portrait up? And I was like, yeah, but it's self-portrait. It's like it's not really me. It's like it's this other person who I'm taking a picture of. You know what I mean? It's like kind of like it's not, I don't identify it as me per se. It's like kind of like this other face. And but at the same time, when I was taking the picture, I was working with the camera on a timer. So I would have to get up and set the timer and sit back down. Get up and set the timer, sit back down. And it's always surprised me how fucking hard it is for me to get a picture of myself. Like it's not, I can do it. It seems like I can do it with other people much more quickly than I can with myself. And I don't know, maybe that's just because like I feel it feels fake or something like that. So while it isn't me in the picture per se, I am very critical of that of the model who is me, like fucking not doing it right. You know what I mean? So I'm probably more cruel to myself than to other people in the shooting, but some people might feel that like, I don't know, but I can't say that people have always loved the pictures I've taken of them. So maybe I'm cruel to them too. I don't know.
Thank you for that answer, Ro, and thank you for that question, Greg.
Yes, thank you, Greg Allen. Miss you.
Thank,
Love you,
thank,
Baba.
thank you, Greg Allen. The next question is from Jennifer. Jennifer is wondering, where do you find yourself in your pictures, and do you think photographs can change a viewer's perspective?
I mean, it's just it's like, I guess, like that was kind of part of the conversation. There's something about it's like, I'm going to quote the title of a MoMA photography exhibition, The Pleasures and Terrors of Domestic Comfort. That's such a great title. And it seems to really describe, perhaps on some level that, especially in the show, where, how I see the world, or, how there's this domestic thing, but it's also fictional, and it's like, it's not just terror, it's not just trauma, it's also the pleasure and the simple delight of like those grapes, or the overly groomed St. Charles, or what is that called? Like that's what the dog is, right? St. Charles. And like these things that like one couldn't predict, but they occur. And then, I happen to be there with my camera and a light, and that's definitely me. I'm not the dog, but that's definitely something that like I wouldn't see it unless I had seen it already. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know that dog as like a Hallmark card, or as a, something from my childhood, or what. I know that thing. And so in a way, I'm like, I'm there, that's it,
I really quick to jump in just 'cause it's so perfect. Friend of the Rail, David Levi Strauss, wrote a book, Between Dog and Wolf, and that's based on Jean Genet's quote in Prisoner of Love, where he says, "We all fear the hour that the dog could, we all fear and hope in the hour that the dog could become the wolf."
Uh-huh.
It's like the feeling that like that's trapped space. We want to be terrified. We also desire to be terrified, and we also hope that we're wrong in it. Like
Yeah.
just there talking about dogs.
Thank you, Andrew.
I'm going to end our Q&A there with a ton of gratitude to everyone for your questions. And I would like to thank Ro and Andrew again for such a luminous conversation on the occasion of this show. And I hope you all go see the show. It's on at Andrew Kreps right now in New York. And it's, if you're in New York, please go see it. I'd like to thank the team at Andrew Kreps for all of their support in preparing for today and for providing all those beautiful images we looked at. I'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art, who sponsor our new social environment program and make weekday conversations like this one possible. They also support our archive on YouTube, where this will be shortly. The Rail has been free and independent for 24 years. A donation directly supports our writers, our staff, and our operations. You can support our work at the link in the chat. And if you're free tomorrow at 1 p.m., join us for a conversation between artist Sinwai Keen and theorist Mackenzie Wark on the occasion of the End Time at Canal Projects. And as is Rail tradition, you all can now turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you again, Ro and Andrew.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Ro. That was really
Ro.
fun.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ro.
Again.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Glad to hear you use the
Go.
iPhone.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Andrew, too.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Andrew. Also,
Thank
that's so
you.
go
fun.
see the show,
Thank you.
everybody. Go
Go
see the show.
show.
Stay warm
Bye,
today.
everyone.
Thanks, Andrew.
Take
Right.
care, everybody.
Yeah, have a great
Yeah.
afternoon.
Bye.
Thank you guys.